Good afternoon, and welcome to the National Press Club. My name is Angela Greiling-Keene. I'm a reporter for Bloomberg News and the 106th president of the National Press Club. We are the world's leading professional organization for journalists, committed to our profession's future through our programming with events such as this, while fostering a free press worldwide. For more information about the National Press Club, please visit our website at www.press.org. To donate to programs offered to the public through the National Press Club Journalism Institute, please visit press.org/institute. On behalf of our members worldwide, I'd like to welcome our speaker and those of you in our audience today. If you hear applause, I'd note that members of the general public are also attending, so it's not necessarily evidence of a lack of journalistic objectivity. I'd also like to welcome our C-SPAN and public radio audiences. You can follow the action today on Twitter using the hashtag NPCLunch. After our guest speech concludes, we'll have a question and answer session. I will ask as many questions as time permits. Now, I'd like to introduce our head table guests. From your right, His Excellency Luis Carlos Villegas, Ambassador for the Republic of Colombia. Her Excellency Maria Ángela Holguín, Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Republic of Colombia. Skipping over the podium, Allison Fitzgerald, Finance and Investigative Reporter at the Center for Public Integrity and Chairwoman of the National Press Club Speakers Committee. Skipping over our speaker for just a moment, Myron Belkind, Vice President of the National Press Club, former Associated Press correspondent, currently professor at George Washington University, and the National Press Club member who organized today's event. Thank you, Myron. Our guest today could well have been a member of the National Press Club if he were not the president of Colombia. As a journalist, President Juan Manuel Santos was a columnist and deputy director of the newspaper El Tiempo and was president of the Freedom of Expression Commission for the Inter-American Press Association. He has also published several books, including The Third Way, co-written with former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, and Check on Terror, where he describes the most important actions against the FARC rebel group during his tenure as head of the Ministry of Defense. Journalist Santos ultimately entered politics. Perhaps he will tell us all why he made that career change, and rose to become president of Colombia in 2010. He was elected for a 4-year term extending until August 2014, obtaining more than 9 million votes, the highest amount obtained by any candidate in the history of Colombian democracy. 2 weeks ago, he announced he will run for re-election in next year's presidential election, saying he wants to be able to finish the peace process he started. President Santos campaigned in 2010 on a platform to carry on the offensive against the leftist guerrillas that have waged war against the government for decades. As president, however, he opened talks with the main rebel group, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC. Negotiators reached a draft agreement on November 6th on one aspect of the talks, and we expect President Santos will tell us today about the negotiations and the chances for an ultimate peace agreement. The peace negotiations could well be a central issue in next year's presidential elections, with one leading opponent calling for an end to the peace talks. Also opposing the peace negotiations is former President Álvaro Uribe, also a former National Press Club speaker, who says he favors someone who, as president, will take a harder stance against the rebels. Please help me give a warm National Press Club welcome to Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for attending this session. For me, it's a great pleasure to be here among my fellow journalists. Why did I switch from journalism to politics? I still ask that question myself. I was seeing the letterhead of one of the rooms, the First Amendment launch, and I remember reading about Thomas Jefferson when he said he was struggling for the First Amendment, and he said, there can be no good government without absolute freedom of expression in the press. And after he was president, he said there cannot be a good government with complete freedom of expression in the press. I don't know. I will tell you at the end of my government if that is true or not. But thank you very much for being here. I will try to summarize what I've been doing in Washington or in the U.S., give you some basic messages, and then open it up for questions. I've been here 2 days, yesterday in Miami, went to the University of Miami, and then had a meeting with the Colombian community in Miami, and this morning I went to a meeting with the Inter-American Dialogue, breakfast there. I was a member of the Inter-American Dialogue for many years. I was co-vice chairman. Then I had a very interesting and fruitful visit to the White House with President Obama. I'm here as his guest on an official visit. Then I went to the OAS, spoke to the General Assembly of the OAS, or the ambassadors and other guests that they had invited. I then went to speak with the head of the Democratic Party in the House, Nancy Pelosi, and a few of the members of the House of the Democratic Party. Then I went to speak with Speaker Boehner and a few of the Republicans in the House, with whom I've been working for many years, not only as president, but also as a former minister, and now I am here. Last night I had a dinner with the Center for American Progress, the members of that think tank, and I'm having dinner tonight with the Atlantic Council. That they invited me to address them. What have been the main messages I've tried to convey to the U.S. officials and to the U.S. public? First, thank the U.S. government and both parties for the help that they have given us since we started collaborating through Plan Colombia. I was telling Donna Salada yesterday, the president of the University of Miami, listen, see how things have changed in these 13 years, because that was in the year 2000. Before, any president who came to Miami went to the Southcom. This time I come to Miami and I go to a university. That, in a way, describes how things have changed in my country and in our relations. And we have been trying to make an effort to go beyond the security challenge, which we have fortunately made tremendous progress there, but Colombia needs much more than security. And that's why I took the decision when I won the election also to work in other fronts besides the security and open the agenda with the world also to other matters besides security. That does not mean that we have neglected security. We have continued to advance in terms of security, and in these 3 years we have given the worst demolishing blows to the FARC, to the ELN. We took down the number one, the number two, 47 of their leaders. The number in arms, of people in arms of these organizations are at their lowest in history since we take some kind of counting of their members. But I also decided to open a peace process with them simply because every war has to end through some kind of negotiation. And I thought the conditions were correct, the conditions were present, and I took the decision to open these negotiations, very conscious of the fact that it would be more complex, would be difficult, that it would have enemies, but also very conscious that this was the correct step and the correct objective. Making war is more popular and easier than making peace. And I can tell you, because I've been in both sides, as Minister of Defense and now as President. We have advanced in the peace process much more than any other moment in our history in many attempts that we have made to have peace after 50 years of war. We managed to negotiate first the agenda. That is a major step in any process to end the conflict. If you agree on the agenda, you have agreed on 50% of what you need, and we did that a bit more than a year ago. And we negotiated five points in the agenda, and we have agreed 2 of those 5 points. The first point has been an agreement on what to do with our rural areas, our rural development. This is extremely important because the guerrillas are a rural guerrilla. They were born there, they grew there, and so for them this issue was very important, and we already have an agreement on that point. The second very important point is political participation. How are they going to participate in politics, the transition from bullets to votes, from arms to arguments? How is it that we're going to open the space for them? And this point is something that the Colombian democracy needed anyway. Progress in strengthening our democracy, strengthening the participation of the people in our democratic process. So we have reached agreement on those 2 points. We are at this very moment negotiating a third item, which is drug trafficking. This is an item that I put on the agenda deliberately with one very simple reason. They have always said that they're not drug traffickers, that they profit from drug trafficking, but they're not drug traffickers. If that is so, I've told them, if that is so, then, and if you want to become legal, you have to become allies of the state against drug trafficking. And if we succeed in the objective, which has already agreed between the 2 parts, Colombia without cocaine, just think what that would mean, not only to Colombia, but to the whole region or the US. Colombia has been the major provider of cocaine to the world and to the US for 40 years. Can you imagine what this would mean if there is a change internally that suddenly disrupts the flow of cocaine to the American cities or to the region? It would be a major breakthrough, and that in itself is an extremely important point besides the other points of having peace in our country. So I have thanked both President Obama and all the authorities that have been supporting this peace process. The peace process needs support. There are enemies who don't want the process to have a good ending for various reasons. Some people think that we are legitimizing the FARC. My answer is, if you don't sit down and speak with your enemy, then how are you going to reach peace? If they think that we can kill the last of the guerrilla, we would take another 50 years in order to do that. So the way to end a conflict of this sort is by sitting down and negotiating a final agreement, and that's what we're trying to do. Some people are saying that we are giving in to the FARC or that we are giving in to the Castro or the Chavez regime. This is nonsense. This is absolute nonsense. We have sought the help from Venezuela and Cuba precisely because they have influence in the FARC, and they have been helpful. And I thank them for their help. But what we want is a very simple objective, all of us, to have peace in my country. We're not negotiating our economic model. We're not negotiating our political institutions. We're not negotiating our democratic principles. We are simply negotiating a transition of these people from their violence and their pursuit of power through violent means to their pursuit of power through democratic and legal means. That's it. That's what we're negotiating. And today, if you ask me how optimistic I am, I continue to say I'm cautiously optimistic. This is a very complex process. 50 years of war, you don't resolve in 50 weeks of conversations. But I am today more optimistic than I was a year ago. I think we are moving in the right direction. I am finding political will in the other side of the table, and I think that if we continue with the progress that we've been making, we will find an agreement which will change the history not only of Colombia, but of the whole region. Simultaneously, when I took over the presidency, I said we need to build the conditions for peace, because peace is not made only by laying down the arms of the guerrillas. Peace is made in the house, in the schools, in the social investment. So I decided to make a very progressive reforms, and I followed an example of a great former American president, Abraham Lincoln, and I invited my former rivals in the campaign to become part of the government. We have here one of them, the head of the Liberal Party, very important party. He is now a labor minister, part of the government, and we created a national unity that has allowed us to approve reforms that nobody imagined possible 4 or 5 years ago in Colombia. For decades had been thought, but that they seemed impossible. With this national union, we have been able to approve those reforms that are giving us the instruments to have a very strong economy, and so especially for me, more important, very good social results. And the facts are there. The economy is growing almost at the average of 5%. We have been creating jobs for 40 months in a row. We have a performance of 40 months, month after month, the unemployment rate coming down. And we can say very proudly that Colombia has created more jobs than any other country in Latin America, including Brazil, which has 4 times our population. This is something which I think is extremely important, because also the jobs that we've been creating for the first time are formal jobs instead of informal jobs. But not only that, we have put in place specific, focused public policies and taken action to fight poverty and extreme poverty. And besides Peru, which has been the country that has performed better in this aspect, but after Peru, we are the best performer of the whole region in terms of decreasing poverty. And also against extreme poverty, we have also put in place specific actions, and we have been able to take out of extreme poverty more than 1,300,000 Colombians. And not only that, one of the big problems that we had, that was one of the bottlenecks for our sustainability in the long run, was how unequal the country was, the social injustice of the country. We were the second most unequal country in the whole of Latin America after Haiti. This was something completely unacceptable to me and to all Colombians. And we said we were going to break this trend, this perverse trend that we've had for so many years, whereby the economy grew, but also the inequality grew. The rich became richer, the poor became poor. We put in place specific actions, we broke this trend, and we can also proudly say that in the last 3 years, Colombia has lowered its inequality more than any other country except for Ecuador. Ecuador performed better than we did. But we are not anymore the number 2 in the hemisphere. We're on the average. Of course, we still have tremendous inequalities. Of course, we have still almost 2 million people unemployed. And of course, we still have around 30% of the Colombians living in poverty. But the progress has been tremendous. And what I hope is that if we reach a peace agreement, then we can concentrate even more of our resources in achieving a better social indicators and more progress in that respect. Excuse me. In our international relations, I also decided to change the way we were doing things. When I arrived to the government, we were in a bit of a bad shape in that respect. The free trade agreement in the US was blocked. The free trade agreement with Europe was blocked. We were on the verge of war with our neighbors, with Venezuela, with Ecuador. And I said, we must change this. We have to be relevant players in the world scenario if we want to have a good internal performance. And we decided to start changing the situation. The first thing I did after assuming power was to call my, until then, one of the worst enemies, which was Mr. Chavez. I invited him to come to Colombia. We sat down, one in front of each other, and I said, listen, we've been at odds for a long time because as a journalist and also as a minister of integrate more profoundly, and things are working quite well. It's become the attraction for many investors and for the world, and we will continue with that initiative and trying to integrate the whole continent. Therefore, I think we're doing well on the economic side. We're doing well on the social front. We're performing well in the international front. But of course, the cherry on the pie would be the peace process. If we are able to finish this peace process, then I think the future for Colombia and for the region would be even much better. The question I put to the people is, if we have achieved those results in the middle of a conflict, just imagine what we could do without the conflict. What I say is the conflict is like a dead mule in the road. It has inhibited the Colombians to realize our full potential. And we have a great potential. Colombia is very rich in almost everything. Not only are we the richest country in biodiversity per square kilometer in the world, we have the largest species of frogs or of birds in the world, but we also have a tremendous human capital, and we now have a tremendous soccer team. We are now one of the best 4 teams in the world. So there is a lot of good future for Colombia. I try to reiterate that every day to my fellow Colombians and to the world. Of course we have problems. Of course we have challenges. Of course there are still many problems that we don't fix a country that has been at war for 50 years in 3 years, but we're making progress. We're making progress, and our relations with the U.S. also couldn't be better. I'm proud to say that we have good relations with both parties. We have very good relations with the Obama administration. The free trade agreement is working very well. Both sides, this has been a win-win situation. And we're now cooperating in things like education, technology. For example, we are connecting every single municipality in Colombia with broadband and fiber optics. This is going to be the first country that's going to be completely connected in Latin America. How can we use that infrastructure, the technology, to better combat poverty, to take to the very remote regions the benefits of technology? Those are the type of challenges that the U.S. can help us a lot. You have here the know-how, you have the universities, you have the software industries, and there we can really create a lot of synergies. So I come here full of optimism and full of good intentions, that are becoming realities. The facts are there. I don't say it, it's the International Monetary Fund that says that Colombia is one of the best performing economies in the world. The social indicators, I'm not saying it, it's the Human Development Program of Oxford University who's saying that Colombia has a model that should be replicated worldwide. But I'm proud that this is happening in my country, and that's the success story I wanted to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you. We have lots of questions on lots of topics. Starting out, the U.S. has had to limit its military presence in South America due to sequestration and prioritizing the Pacific. How concerned are you about this, especially for drug interdiction? And is this something you talked about with President Obama today?
Well, we value extremely the help that the U.S. has given us through Plan Colombia. It has been extremely useful. I say it not because of the quantity, because when you add up what Plan Colombia has given us versus what we have had to invest ourselves, it's a very small percentage. But the quality of that help in terms of intelligence, of practical ways to be more effective in, for example, the fight against drug trafficking has been very, very useful. And but that is a knowledge that we have already acquired. And as I mentioned, it's a knowledge that we're sharing with other countries. And in a way, what we're doing with the US is lowering the cost and expanding and strengthening the results through, you would say, a proxy procedure whereby Colombia is providing this help with the help of the US, and in that case, you could make the resources much more efficient.
Is the U.S. going in the right direction by evolving from security aid to economic development help? And what more should the U.S. be doing?
Well, I think yes, it's going in the correct direction, but they should never ignore that the security is the basis for progress of any society. But in the case of Colombia, if we learn, and we have been improving all our security indicators, it makes a lot of sense to invest those resources where they have a better return, especially a better social return. So I think that is a wise way to use the resources better. And that's what is happening in Colombia. We have made tremendous progress in security, and now we have to make more progress on the social agenda. And if the U.S. is willing to help, well, we more than welcome it.
You talked about income inequality decreasing in Colombia. Of course, in the U.S., it's increasing. Did you offer President Obama any advice on that?
No, I didn't. I forgot to tell him about it. But we are making a lot of progress there, and through very effective mechanisms. For example, we have a program whereby we have identified about 1.2 million families, and each family has one person who is the manager of that family. It has 45 different factors that have to be solved in order for that family to graduate from extreme poverty. And we have 18 institutions of the state, of the government, providing help in that process. And that has been extremely successful. And we've brought a lot of people out of extreme poverty through mechanisms like this one. I tell my people always to innovate, especially on the social agenda and the social policies, and people have many times great ideas on how to do that. And this is something that I think should be shared with the other countries, because it's working, and what works should be copied.
You mentioned the free trade agreement that was signed about a year and a half ago. Was there a discussion today with President Obama on how that's going and whether anything should change with it?
Yes, we came to the conclusion that the free trade agreement is working quite well. The U.S. is exporting more to Colombia and vice versa. There are some specific issues where we have mutual, not complaints, but mutual efforts to obstacles to overcome. They mentioned something with the labor, some issues with the labor situation in Colombia. We addressed those issues very clearly on what we're doing there. I wanted the U.S. to be more helpful in lifting obstacles that would allow us, for example, to export our avocados to the U.S. Because I was giving in the White House a delicious salad as a first plate in the lunch, and there was an avocado, but I said this is not a Colombian avocado because we have restrictions. We need those restrictions to be lifted. Those type of items are the ones, or the subjects are the ones that we shared. But in general, we are very happy with the way the free trade agreement is going on, is performing.
There's been concern about the protection of workers under the free trade agreement. Do you think that workers are being adequately protected?
Yes, we still have to go further, but the difference for the protection of workers in Colombia in the last 2 or 3 years, what it was then and what it is now, is a major difference. Again, I recognize that we have to go further, but the progress is there and the facts demonstrate it.
What's your take on the protests by farmers and other workers in rural areas? To what do you attribute the protests, and what resolution do you see for the future?
The rural areas have been neglected, not for years, for decades, or even for centuries. And that's where the poverty and the inequality is concentrated, much more than the urban areas. And what happened there is, because of the commodity crisis, for example, the price of coffee went down from $3 to $1 per pound in the international markets, where the people, with good reason, went out to protest. What are we doing to address this problem? As I mentioned, the peace process has one of the items, the first item, this vision of a shared vision on how we can give more importance to the rural areas. We are increasing the budget to be invested in rural areas. This year we approved for next year 5 billion pesos. 5 billion pesos is a huge amount of money compared to what they received before, the rural sector. But more importantly, we are constructing a long-term policy for the rural areas with the participation of everybody, especially the peasants, for them to be on the locomotive, not on the wagon in this train that we think is going to be extremely useful for Colombia and the world. The world is seeking more and more food, and Colombia is one of the few countries that can expand in a short period of time the production of food. And so there we have an opportunity, and that's what I'm trying to build through different policies and different discussions, this overall agrarian policy that will help the rural areas to develop at a faster rate.
If an agreement was reached 2 months ago, why are protests continuing?
Sorry?
Why are protests continuing if an agreement has been achieved?
But very small. Some coffee growers claim that the help has not arrived to their region, but this is a very marginal protest. If you analyze the protest that you are receiving today compared to what we had some time ago, is completely different from what was happening before.
Do you think that conditions for Colombian farmers will truly improve only when a peace agreement is reached?
Well, I hope they will improve, not, with or without agreement. What I've said is we have a set of objectives that are not dependent on an agreement with the FARC. We need to invest in the rural areas regardless if there's an agreement or not. We need to take public goods to the rural areas, roads, schools, hospitals, regardless of if there's an agreement with the FARC or not. And what I've said is we need to establish a policy that is shared by everybody, and with that policy, we have to find the resources to finance those projects.
In your talks with President Obama today, did he give his support for the peace talks with FARC?
Definitely, yes, and I appreciate that very much. He has been supporting the peace process. He was one of the first ones to know about the peace process when it was a secret and nobody knew about them. I shared that secret with him when he went to Colombia during the Cartagena summit. And since then, not only him, the whole government has been extremely supportive of the peace process.
Today, the FARC called for an international conference on illicit drugs to include the U.S. and Europe. What is your reaction to that request?
Well, the call for a discussion on what to do with the fight and the war against drugs has been on the agenda for a long time. As a matter of fact, we put this on the agenda in the Cartagena summit, which approved a mandate to the OAS. I was discussing with the OAS today about this specific issue. We made a big exercise, an analysis of different scenarios that would happen if we take different actions. These scenarios should be used as an input for a worldwide discussion on this issue. The question is, are we doing the best we can, or can we do something more effective? And this is something that the world needs to discuss. We've been proposing it for a long time, and we've been receiving increasingly amount of support, including the U.S., because they approved the mandate to the OAS on this issue. And I think it's useful and it's positive to re-examine the whole issue of the war on drugs, because it's a multilateral world problem that affects everybody.
You set a one-year time frame for the talks with the FARC, and we're, of course, closing in on that year, and you've gotten to point 3. How long are you willing to extend the time frame for those talks?
When I mentioned a year, it was simply because last November, they asked me, how long would you like to have these talks? And I said, I would prefer that these talks last months and not years. And so everybody started making the arithmetic and say, well, months would go to November or December of this year, which we are in right now. Of course, I would have liked for this to advance faster, but I think that we have made enough progress to maintain the optimism. I don't know how long it will take to finish the agreement. I hope it would not take too long, but it is completely counterproductive to put on a process like this fatal deadlines. And so I don't have a fatal deadline, and I'm not putting a fatal deadline on the agenda.
Is some sort of deadline important, or are you willing to continue indefinitely with no deadline at all?
No, of course, nobody will continue indefinitely. These processes wear out. The support will wear out. I think we're all conscious of that. But I prefer to say we hope to finish as soon as possible without putting a definite deadline, because the experience in other processes, when you put deadlines, have been very counterproductive.
A questioner asks you to describe the agreement on point 2 on political participation. Questioner asks, what role will the FARC have in Colombia's democracy, and have they been guaranteed political representation?
Well, of course, what the process is all about is for them to have space in the democratic arena of Colombia. And by giving certain guarantees that they will have this space where they will then be stimulated to change their arms for votes and change their way of doing politics or trying to achieve what they want to achieve through violence and do it through legal means. And the answer is yes, we have given them the sufficient conditions and guarantees for them to be able to participate in politics. That's what the process is all about.
You mentioned that your talks are coming after 50 years of strife. It's not something new for your country. How do you tell us that your negotiations differ from previous peace talks, for example, under President Pastrana?
Well, the conditions are completely different. The country is completely different. The military correlation of forces is completely different. The conditions that we put to start negotiations are completely different. During the Pastrana administration, they cleared an area which is the size of Switzerland for the FARC to be there. I decided, when I said there would not be 1 centimeter of our territory cleared for them, because we had a very bad experience with that example. I said there will be no ceasefire. I said we will negotiate under the principle of nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. This has been a very well-planned process compared to others that were not as well-planned, and the results are there.
You referred to your predecessor, who, of course, has been critical of your administration, especially in the dealing with FARC. Can you please explain your response to his criticism?
No, I prefer to dedicate my time to better things.
Why are the talks being held in Havana? Why was Cuba selected as the venue rather than, say, Panama or any other locale you could have chosen?
Cuba gave our counterparts more confidence. They were extremely worried about their own security. When I said we will not negotiate in Colombia, Cuba seemed to be a good place, and the Cuban government has been extremely helpful. And since the beginning, they said we will help to host these meetings, and I think that made the correct decision.
Questioner says, you know where the where the FARC is in the jungle and where their bases are, and we have lots of oversight, surveillance, and intelligence on this topic. Why have you not just bombed them out of existence, and are you afraid of repercussions?
We have been bombing them quite frequently. That's the truth. The thing is that they have learned how to hide and how to protect themselves from this intelligence. They learn very fast, but believe me, we continue trying.
Will the peace overtures you're making with the FARC make anti-drug efforts more difficult in the U.S. or any other country?
On the contrary, I think it would make it much easier. Again, can you imagine the FARC that has been accused of being the biggest cartel in the world now in our side, helping to substitute coca plantations with other crops and helping us identify the routes where drug traffickers move their drugs. This would be a major achievement.
Questioner says, Colombia's drugs mostly go through Mexico to get to the U.S. What are you doing to get Mexican cooperation to stop this flow?
We have very close cooperation with Mexico. We've been even training many of their people in Colombia. We have a permanent real-time information sharing. We have the two police cooperate among themselves. There is a very strong and increasing cooperation between the two countries.
Do you see a Colombia free of cocaine someday? Is that possible?
Well, I dream about it, yes. And if we reach an agreement, a good agreement on this issue, at least we can see cocaine diminishing substantially in Colombia, which would be a great achievement. Colombia has been the country that has suffered the most in this war on drugs in the world. We have lost our best politicians, our best policemen, our best judges, our best people has been spilled in this war on drugs. And we will continue because it's a matter for us of national security. So anything that will improve the situation in our effort to eradicate drugs from Colombia would be extremely beneficial for the Colombian society.
Looking to other concerns involving the U.S., has the National Security Agency's monitoring of private communications tainted diplomatic relations between Colombia and the U.S.?
Well, we have been sharing information on security issues for a long time. Colombia is a very particular country in the sense that we share with the U.S. and other intelligence agency all the information, and therefore, if we have spied on our common enemies, it has been done with the cooperation of the Colombian authorities and the U.S. authorities. Now, I don't know of information of spying outside that sphere of cooperation. If I knew about that, then of course I would condemn it immediately.
Some of your neighbors in Latin America, of course, have been infuriated by revelations of U.S. eavesdropping. Is their anger justified?
Well, nobody likes to be spied. And I think, yes, no, if somebody spies on you, you have all the right to get mad. And so they have all the right to get mad if they're spied without permission.
Looking to China, China's investment in Latin America, of course, continues to grow, and the country signed more than 50 bilateral cooperation agreements just last week. Can you tell us more about the Colombia-China economic relationship, and do you see any effects there that it may have on U.S.-Colombia economic relations?
We have a normal relation with China, good relation. Our biggest commercial partner is the U.S. The trade with China has increased, but not dramatically. And of course, China is now a big player in the world economy. I have been sharing with many of the persons I've been talking to a situation where I think there's an opportunity for Latin America and the U.S. There's a new concept that is becoming a very important concept. Is the concept that is referred to as a demographic dividend. The source of growth in the world that China was some years ago, it started to diminish because the negative demographic dividend that they're having, because their population is not increasing, on the contrary, it's decreasing. You have that problem in Europe, and you're having that problem here in the U.S. One of the few areas in the world where you have a positive demographic dividend is Latin America, where you still have young population. And there you have a tremendous opportunity if the U.S. sees Latin America with those eyes. There's a tremendous opportunity to increase the cooperation between the two areas. And even you're going to need immigration sooner or later if you want your economy to continue growing, and that immigration will probably come naturally from Latin America. That even has a political dividend here. So there is a tremendous opportunity for the U.S. in Latin America. Of course, China is always very interested in Latin America's energy resources, in our water, in our biodiversity. And if they want to invest in Latin America, well, welcome. So be it.
Thank you. We are almost out of time, but before asking one last question, just a couple of housekeeping matters to take care of. First of all, I'd like to remind you about our upcoming speakers. On December 10th, we have the Honorable Annis Parker, Mayor of Houston, Texas. On December 16th, Dan Ackerson, Chairman and CEO of General Motors. And on December 19th, Ricky Skaggs, Grammy Award winner and bluegrass legend. Second, I would like to present our guest today with the traditional National Press Club coffee mug, hopefully to be filled with Colombian coffee. Thank you. And for the final question, you mentioned the good prospects of Colombia's national soccer team. The U.S. team is also looking up for a change. How do you see the prospects for our two countries in the World Cup?
Well, I told President Obama this morning that I wished that our teams would not meet in the first round because it would be very disrespectful to eliminate the U.S. So fast.
Diplomatic, thank you. Thank you, of course, for coming today. I'd also like to thank the National Press Club staff, including the Journalism Institute and Broadcast Center, for helping organize today's event. Here's a reminder, you can find more information about the National Press Club on our website at www.press.org. And please remain seated for some closing remarks in Spanish by President Santos. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
¿Dónde va a ser? ¿Aquí ya? ¿Ya aquí? Bueno, buenas tardes. Quiero brevemente explicarles e informarles sobre el día de hoy. Por la mañana tuvimos una reunión con la Junta Directiva del Diálogo Interamericano, una institución a la cual yo pertenecí durante muchos años. Luego tuvimos la visita a la Casa Blanca con el presidente Obama. Fue una visita muy productiva. Comenzó apoyando el proceso de paz en forma clara y contundente, apoyo que yo le agradecí mucho. Es muy importante que el presidente del gobierno norteamericano, que Estados Unidos apoye este proceso. Hablamos también sobre los otros puntos de nuestra agenda bilateral, la ayuda que nos pueden dar, por ejemplo, en materia de energía. Aquí han desarrollado energía y una tecnología de los hidrocarburos no convencionales, donde Colombia aparentemente tiene un gran potencial y necesitamos esa tecnología, sobre todo para proteger el medio ambiente en la explotación de ese tipo de hidrocarburos. Hablamos también sobre la inmensa oportunidad que existía en la cooperación en tecnología. Colombia está haciendo un esfuerzo enorme para conectar todos los municipios. Cómo vamos a usar esa infraestructura tecnológica es uno de los grandes desafíos que tenemos, y ahí Estados Unidos puede ayudar muchísimo, y eso como instrumento para luchar con más efectividad en contra de la pobreza y de la desigualdad, pues es algo que a nosotros nos entusiasma mucho y le entusiasma mucho también al presidente Obama. Inclusive decidimos formar un grupo de trabajo específicamente para estudiar las posibilidades de cooperar en ese frente. Yo le le dije la oportunidad que existía en este momento de revivir el concepto de la Alianza para el Progreso que el presidente Kennedy llevó a América Latina hace más de 50 años, que podría ser una alianza para la prosperidad y la paz, que podría tener unos ingredientes diferentes porque es un mundo diferente, pero con oportunidades enormes. Quedamos de ver cómo podamos materializar esa iniciativa, que creo que puede ser una iniciativa muy productiva para todas las Américas. También hablamos sobre la posibilidad de cooperar en materia de educación y de seguir cooperando en algo que ha sido muy importante, los dos países trabajando juntos para darle más seguridad a la región, sobre todo los países centroamericanos, las islas del Caribe. Ahí hemos hecho hasta el momento muchísimas operaciones conjuntas. Colombia ha entrenado más de 17.000 oficiales o personal de Centroamérica y del Caribe, y quedamos de triplicar la actividad en ese frente el año entrante frente a lo que venimos haciendo este año. Fue una visita muy agradable. Los dos coincidimos en que posiblemente nuestras relaciones Estados Unidos-Colombia están en un momento ideal de nuestra historia y que teníamos que seguir trabajando para mantener esta buena dinámica en las relaciones entre los dos países. El Tratado de Libre Comercio va funcionando bien, los dos países están ganando, los dos países están progresando, y es una situación también muy diferente a la que teníamos anteriormente. La situación en Colombia es muy diferente y esta conversación entre iguales, identificando los puntos donde estamos trabajando juntos y donde podemos trabajar juntos, es otra forma mucho más productiva de tener unas relaciones con Estados Unidos. También estuvimos luego en la OEA. Allá recibimos el respaldo de todos los países de la OEA y del secretario general para el proceso de paz. La OEA ya hace una presencia en Colombia a través de la misión que tiene en Colombia para ayudar en el posconflicto, y eso es algo para nosotros muy importante. Les agradecimos el apoyo y el soporte que nos han venido ofreciendo. Luego me fui a unas reuniones con los dos partidos, tanto el republicano como el demócrata, a través de sus líderes en la Cámara de Representantes, de Nancy Pelosi, y un grupo de parlamentarios, de representantes del Partido Demócrata. Tuvimos una reunión muy agradable, donde les contamos en qué estábamos, donde ellos nos expresaron sus puntos de vista sobre el desarrollo de todas nuestras relaciones. Lo mismo hicimos con el líder del Partido Republicano, con el Speaker Boehner, y los más representativos de la Cámara del partido. Yo les agradecí a los dos el apoyo que Colombia ha venido recibiendo, no solamente en el acuerdo de libre comercio, sino en todo lo que nos han venido apoyando desde que se lanzó el Plan Colombia. Si el Plan Colombia tuvo un éxito como el que ha tenido hasta ahora, que es posiblemente la iniciativa bipartidista más exitosa que se ha lanzado en Estados Unidos en los últimos tiempos, que cerrar con broche de oro, con un proceso de paz, sería el fin perfecto para ese proceso que hasta ahora ha sido tan exitoso. Eso lo entendieron perfectamente y por eso también están muy entusiasmados en que este proceso de paz tenga éxito. De manera que, en resumen, ha sido un día muy productivo, que de aquí van a salir muchos beneficios para los colombianos. El apoyo de todos los sectores de Estados Unidos a Colombia es prácticamente unánime. No he encontrado ningún reclamo importante, ninguna crítica importante. O sea, estamos en un mundo muy diferente al que estábamos hace unos años, donde aquí había hasta protestas en algunos sitios por la presencia del gobierno colombiano. Eso me satisface muchísimo y así tenemos que continuar para que estas relaciones sean cada vez más fructíferas, tanto para Estados Unidos como para Colombia y América Latina. Muchas gracias. In community in Miami, and this morning I went to a meeting with the Inter-American Dialogue, breakfast there. I was a member of the Inter-American Dialogue for many years. I was co-vice chairman. Then I had a very interesting and fruitful visit to the White House with President Obama. I'm here as his guest on an official visit. Then I went to the OAS, spoke to the General Assembly of the OAS, or the ambassadors and other guests that they had invited. I then went to speak with the head of the Democratic Party in the House, Nancy Pelosi, and a few of the members of the House of the Democratic Party. Then I went to speak with Speaker Boehner and a few of the Republicans in the House, with whom I've been working for many years, not only as president, but also as a former minister, and now I am here. Last night I had a dinner with the Center for American Progress, the members of that think tank, and I'm having dinner tonight with the Atlantic Council, that they invited me to address them. What have been the main messages I've tried to convey to the U.S. officials and to the U.S. public? First, thank the U.S. government and both parties for the help that they have given us since we started collaborating through Plan Colombia. I was telling Donna Salada yesterday, the president of the University of Miami, listen, see how things have changed in these 13 years, because that was in the year 2000. Before, any president who came to Miami went to the Southcom. This time I come to Miami and I go to a university. That, in a way, describes how things have changed in my country and in our relations. And we have been trying to make an effort to go beyond the security challenge, which we have fortunately made tremendous progress there, but Colombia needs much more than security. And that's why I took the decision when I won the election also to work in other fronts besides the security and open the agenda with the world also to other matters besides security. That does not mean that we have neglected security. We have continued to advance in terms of security, and in these 3 years we have given the worst demolishing blows to the FARC, to the ELN. We took down the number one, the number two, 47 of their leaders. The number in arms, of people in arms of these organizations are at their lowest in history since we take some kind of counting of their members. But I also decided to open a peace process with them simply because every war has to end through some kind of negotiation. And
Alvaro Uribe, also a former National Press Club speaker, who says he favors someone who, as president, will take a harder stance against the rebels. Please help me give a warm National Press Club welcome to Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for attending this session. For me, it's a great pleasure to be here among my fellow journalists. Why did I switch from journalism to politics? I still ask that question myself. I was seeing the letterhead of one of the rooms, the First Amendment launch, and I remember reading about Thomas Jefferson when he said he was struggling for the First Amendment, and he said there can be no good government without absolute freedom of expression in the press. And after he was president, he said there cannot be a good government with complete freedom of expression in the press. I don't know. I will tell you at the end of my government if that is true or not. But thank you very much for being here. I will try to summarize what I've been doing in Washington or in the U.S., give you some basic messages, and then open it up for questions. I've been here 2 days, yesterday in Miami, went to the University of Miami, and then had a meeting with the Colombias.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the National Press Club. My name is Angela Greiling-Keene. I'm a reporter for Bloomberg News and the 106th president of the National Press Club. We are the world's leading professional organization for journalists, committed to our profession's future through our programming with events such as this, while fostering a free press worldwide. For more information about the National Press Club, please visit our website at www.press.org. To donate to programs offered to the public through the National Press Club Journalism Institute, please visit press.org/institute. On behalf of our members worldwide, I'd like to welcome our speaker and those of you in our audience today. If you hear applause, I'd note that members of the general public are also attending, so it's not necessarily evidence of a lack of journalistic objectivity. I'd also like to welcome our C-SPAN and public radio audiences. You can follow the action today on Twitter using the hashtag NPCLunch. After our guest speech concludes, we'll have a question and answer session. I will ask as many questions as time permits. Now, I'd like to introduce our head table guests. From your right, His Excellency Luis Carlos Villegas, Ambassador for the Republic of Colombia. Her Excellency Maria Ángela Holguín, Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Republic of Colombia. Skipping over the podium, Allison Fitzgerald, Finance and Investigative Reporter at the Center for Public Integrity and Chairwoman of the National Press Club Speakers Committee. Skipping over our speaker for just a moment, Myron Belkind, Vice President of the National Press Club, former Associated Press correspondent, currently professor at George Washington University, and the National Press Club member who organized today's event. Thank you, Myron. Our guest today could well have been a member of the National Press Club if he were not the president of Colombia. As a journalist, President Juan Manuel Santos was a columnist and deputy director of the newspaper El Tiempo and was president of the Freedom of Expression Commission for the Inter-American Press Association. He has also published several books, including The Third Way, co-written with former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, and Check on Terror, where he describes the most important actions against the FARC rebel group during his tenure as head of the Ministry of Defense. Journalist Santos ultimately entered politics. Perhaps he will tell us all why he made that career change, and rose to become president of Colombia in 2010. He was elected for a 4-year term extending until August 2014, obtaining more than 9 million votes, the highest amount obtained by any candidate in the history of Colombian democracy. 2 weeks ago, he announced he will run for re-election in next year's presidential election, saying he wants to be able to finish the peace process he started. President Santos campaigned in 2010 on a platform to carry on the offensive against the leftist guerrillas that have waged war against the government for decades. As president, however, he opened talks with the main rebel group, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC. Negotiators reached a draft agreement on November 6th on one aspect of the talks, and we expect President Santos will tell us today about the negotiations and the chances for an ultimate peace agreement. The peace negotiations could well be a central issue in next year's presidential elections, with one leading opponent calling for an end to the peace talks. Also opposing the peace negotiations is former President Alvaro